feet a year from its population. That's what it looks like when it germinates, and of course this is what we call the rosette stage as it grows, and you can see the number of days and how quickly it's an annual. So it grows 1 year, dies, puts out seed and dies. But look how fast it gets roots down, and that's important to what it ends up doing to us. And that deep taproot research here shows mines water. In fact, about 66% utilization of water in a watershed. So invasion by star thistle can affect how fast runoff occurs in the fall, and is affecting watersheds. If you have pasture land, it can affect productivity. We've certainly shown at research here that it affects what kind of plants grow there. And probably for most of you, my calls go up in about, July and August when those barbs come out and people go, what do I do to get rid of this stuff? So the other concern is, it'll kill my horses. And so the first thing, it's poisonous only to horses. It has an alkaloid, so once they're consumed and got it, they're done. There isn't taking them to the vet and they're healed. They're done. They get chewing disease, spongiform or holes in the brain, and it's over. But much to most people's surprise, it takes 600 pounds of dry star thistle, not green and wet, for over a 1 to 3 month period for this occur. We see most of it in the fall, actually. You would think, spring when it's green. No, it's fall when most of the horses are submitted to our vet school at Davis. So that's the biggest worry. In most cases, I'll tell people if there's sufficient feed, you shouldn't have a problem, so don't panic. But then when I say that, there's just one goofy horse or two that goes out and will consume it. So it's something you just need to be mindful of when you have it. Now here's the key. When I started with extension, we had one policy. Nuke it, nuke it, nuke it, nuke it. Spray, spray, spray. And we didn't care about how the plant worked. We hired a person named Joe DiTomaso. Since he's Italian, I call him the godfather of weed control. And his first thing when he got here was, all right, how well has nuking it been working for all of you? Oh, we spray every year and it's still there. So his first thing is, to be able to control any plant, you've got to understand its biology. Find its weak point and get after it. Well, the first thing is, it's annual. So it has to put out its seed each year and grow. What's the other thing? 2 things make star thistle grow. Sunlight. Its seeds are actually smarter than you would think, smarter than some people sometimes. It senses, is there any competition around? Before it germinates. How does it do that? Sunlight. So when you see a grader goes by along county roads, next thing you know, all sorts of star thistle seed. Why? Sunlight sensitive. You go out and disc, you'll get a ton of star thistle seeds. Why? Sunlight sensitive. So the other thing is it's moisture. So it'll germinate about year round around this place. Now the seeds in our area are 3 to 5 years. So I'm telling you this because if you want to eradicate it, here's the number of years you're going to have to stay on the project. It's 3 to 5 years. Here's the bad news. A fully stocked stand puts out anywhere from 50 to 200 million seeds. That's a lot of seeds per acre. And it only requires 2 million to restock the stand. So you realize the gradient is going against you. But you can manage that. But it does set up when people call me and say, I've got star thistle, I want to do something. First question is, what's your goal? Getting rid of it or just living with it? And if you want to get rid of it or manage it, you think about the seed bank. We really don't care about the plant. The plant's just giving us more seeds. What we're worried about is managing that seed bank. Think about seeds. You're managing seeds. You're trying to deplete the number of seeds that are out there. Here's the problem. You've got to be, with the numbers I just told you about, that it puts out and what you get, you've got 98% control to deplete the seed bank. And again, you're looking at 4 to 5 years to do that. Well, under those conditions, herbicide's the best one. But I'll tell you, I got a guy in Camptonville that pulled for 6 years. Pulled every one because he didn't want to use herbicides. And he used another technique I'm going to show you, and he got rid of it. So, although I say herbicides is the easiest, you can do it the other way. There are bugs that the government has released. CDFA and the USDA, our federal and state ag people, have released bugs. This one is hairy weevil and peacock. They're pretty much everywhere around here. Here's the problem. if you look at, they feed on the seed only. We really need to find more bugs, and we bring bugs in from where it's native in Turkey. You go to Turkey, there's a star thistle plant here, one way over there. Why? Because they've got natural hosts. Here are pests. We moved the seed without the pest, but we brought in one pest that looked like it was going to feed on the stem. It fed on native artichoke, California artichoke. So it went back to Turkey and was never released here. So the present ones we have released, you're only getting 45% control. Better than nothing, but not effective. So if you've got one strategy is that bare soil gets sunlight, you could go out and seed other plants that would shade out and choke out and compete for moisture and sunlight, and this has been effective. Rose clover germinates early and gets up and will effectively reduce star thistle. It doesn't choke it out and get rid of it. Same thing with annual rye. So that guy in Camptonville I told you about had horses. He planted annual rye. He waited till the rye went to seed each year, put the horses out there, they replanted it, and he pulled every star thistle. So he made the system work for him instead of using our traditional answer of herbicide. This will work, mowing will work. Remember, it's an annual plant, so it's not going to regrow from the base. So if you wait till it's just starting to flower, at this point there's no seeds are viable. At 2 to 5% of the plant is flowering, you cut below where it branches. If you cut above the branching, it'll regrow. But what's happened is, since it's an annual, it's depleted all its root carbohydrates to start flowering. So if you cut it below where it's branching, then you'll kill it. Now the problem is most mowers only cut it 4 inches, and unless you make it grow in a bunch of grass where it has to get up high before it branches. I've seen guys with weed eaters and all they do is grow these star thistle that look like little flat bushes. So you've got to get underneath where it branches for this to be effective. But it can be effective if you use it. Burning, and this is actually one here at the field station where they're burning. You do it in June or July, mostly June. Dry grasses that'll carry the fire, and 2 to 5% bloom again. So you're getting it before its seeds are viable, but yet it's expelled all its root carbohydrates out, and you essentially torch it. And remember, bare soil, what's this do? You can come in with a herbicide and all that seed bank says, there's nobody out here next year. They all jump up and try and grow, and that's a very effective program, as you'll see. There's smoke and escape problems with burning, and not something you would use in your yard or around your house, but it sure works on big areas, and you always want to work with the fire agencies before you even think about doing something like that. Grazing. I want to point out we've managed into star thistle with grazing by removing the animals when we probably ought to be using it more. So there are people with goats that will graze that actually can do grazing, and even with sheep that you can reduce it. But you're more difficult to say this is going to eliminate it, but it will reduce it. Here's the 2 herbicides that are most effective, Transline being the old one, Milestone being the new one. You want to apply those in January or February, and you want to use that in a sense of thinking more than a single year project. Remember, we got 4 to 5 years if your eradication's your goal. And so one of the things is Transline, and then maybe come in with Roundup with a dye. And we'll talk about that a little more. Remember, it's a long-term investment if you're trying to eradicate it, and we have here on the field station. And there's a susceptibility, because everybody's worried, if I spray this, what else am I going to kill? In your handout, there's a susceptibility chart of what these things will kill. They won't kill filaree and other things that are out there that you may be worried about. Here's the success story you can see. There's your star thistle. Here's where it was sprayed. That kind of night and day stuff. Roundup is very effective on star thistle. We'd only say use this where annual plants are, because the annual grasses go to seed. The Roundup gets that 2 to 5% flowering, and you spray it. And then we recommend you use a dye so you remember which plant you sprayed. If you had a fully stocked stand of star thistle, this may be tough, but this is more after you've used Transline for 2 years. Then you come in and use this. Key around this area, if you have high calcium water, you need to acidify the water before you use Roundup. Most of the time people call me and say, I sprayed Roundup and it doesn't work. litmus paper, check the pH, you find out it's very high, and that's why the Roundup did not work, because the calcium locks up the Roundup molecules so the plant can't use it.
What are you saying, maybe put in a quarter cup of...
They have on the label, it'll talk about acidification, and it'll say right there the amount. I can't remember. Dustin, do you remember? We talked about it. It's a pound per 10 gallons, I think.
That's right, yeah. A little bit of vinegar?
They use ammonium sulfate. Thank you for pointing that out. Ammonium sulfate fertilizer is what they recommend as an additive to acidify. But you can buy a high price from the herbicide companies, high price acidification agents that you can put in. But the main thing is to acidify the water, then add the Roundup after you've acidified the water, if you think you've got a pH problem. And you'll know that because it won't be as effective with or without. So you can see here, this was at the field station following 2 years of control. Burn, pretty much got rid of it. We're down below 5%. Burn Clearlid, which is Transline. Control, we were up around 13% with nothing. Look at this. If we use Transline and then burn, we're actually higher. But again, you're working that seed bank down. That might be a good news. The next year it may be lower. And here's 2 years of Transline. So you can see that combination works best. Quickly, I'll go through blackberries. They're generally a torturous thing along riparian areas because they have this significant root. This is Himalaya blackberry. There's actually a native one called California that's supposed to grow here, but this one was introduced, and boy is it a bugger. People use burning, but that's not a real good long-term strategy. It is if you want to get rid of a lot of it before you spray, so you use less herbicides. Burn it first, then when those nice tender shoots regrow, you can treat that and use a lot less herbicide. Mechanical, it's got to be repeated, and the problem is you'll move fragments around with bulldozers. It's better to crush it with a bulldozer and burn it, and then treat it. But you can do this. Mowing the same way, you just got to keep repeating it, because what you're trying to do is wear out the root carbohydrates. It sends up a new shoot, you mow it down. Before it can sequester root carbohydrates through sunlight, you keep removing it. So it's a repeated process if you're going to mow it or bulldoze it to make it effective. Common herbicides are Roundup, Garlon, and Crossbow, and we'll talk about those things. If you're going to use Crossbow, it's a restricted use permit required, and so that's a little more regulatory. You've got to work with the ag commissioner. All of you can buy Roundup at Home Depot or the local garden store or wherever, and that's probably the easiest one. People will say, well, it never worked for me. Well, timing's important. Late summer, early fall's when you want to use Roundup. Midsummer and later for Garlon, midsummer. So these you're trying to get them when they're fast growing. And this one you're getting towards fall when they're trying to put things down in their roots, and they take the Roundup back down to the roots and kill them there. Here's the key thing. Remember to use a surfactant so it adheres to the leaves. Yes?
As you said, blackberries are usually in riparian areas. How does spraying affect the trees?
Well, you want to make sure you're not spraying over water. So you have to be really careful when you apply these products.
But the runoff's okay?
The runoff's okay if you don't put it into the water. You're just trying to apply it to the foliage. There is Roundup in another formulation. It's called Rodeo, and you can spray over water with Rodeo, but it's a little more expensive. So that's what people use when they're worried about water, is they use Rodeo. Last thing, I've got some handouts back there. Two of them. One is put together by Dow AgroScience. I'm not advertising for anybody, but Scott's going to talk to you about getting rid of brush around your home to make sure it's safe. This is what we put together for homeowners on different mixes of herbicides you can use. And the important thing they talk about, just as you were saying, here's the foliar application, and then low volume foliar, and probably the one homeowners are really dialing in on now if they don't want to use a lot of herbicides, is when you cut things, you can actually apply herbicides just to that cut. So you're not using a lot, you're not globally applying it, and it's very effective to keep this from sprouting back. And then here's a basil example where you just paint it on the outside of the plant. Now that only works with certain plants, but Bo Miller, who put this out, is willing for you to call him. He'll answer your questions. Hey, full disclosure, I let the other companies say what they thought you could control those same plants with. And so you've got two options here. The handouts are in the back. They're not included in your proceedings, but they're out in the back there, and feel free to take those. And if you have any questions, both Scott and Bo are willing to answer any of your questions. That's all I have. Thank you.
Glenn's not going to be able to stay with us for too long, so if you have any questions for him now.
Yes, junk it. The wiregrass you can control with 2,4-D early in the season.
Early in the season.
Well, when the dandelions are blooming is when you can generally control it. Rapid growth, Pacific spike rush, the big tall one, as soon as it puts out its seed head on the side, you'll see a little brown seed head. Then on pasture label, you can go up to 2 pounds of 2,4-D per acre, and that's the very effective rate, is around 2 pounds, and it'll take it out. On the Pacific spike rush, I should say, you have to use Roundup, either rope wick or direct application. But it works very well on Roundup does. On the small little Juncus or wiregrass, then 2,4-D works. But don't use 2,4-D on Pacific because it'll just burn it back and it comes right back at you with a vengeance. That's the big tall one.
I haven't been having much luck with Roundup at 2%, so, but I had read that maybe just after bloom was a better.
Perfect. We did it here, and we've done it at a couple ranches down near Marysville. Perfect. Just like you say, just as it sends out that little brown thing to the side of the head, it'll work perfect.
Roundup at 2%.
2%, yeah. Yes?
On the blackberry, how about grazing?
Goats work, again, here's the deal, it's like mechanical. You want to completely defoliate and make that thing send out all its root carbohydrates, defoliate. So goats continuously on it, that's a good point, I'm glad you brought that up, are very effective. And they will, over time, deplete the plant's root carbohydrates, make them susceptible to disease then, and then they die. So that is effective management treatment with goats. No other livestock, sheep will eat a little, but goats are the only real answer for blackberries. Yes?
It's probably worth mentioning that Roundup, since it came off whatever, not copyrights,
That
it comes in all kinds of formulations.
Yes.
Just spray the bottle to 18% to 41%. So when people are trying to make a 2% solution, they have to be very careful to know what they have, what the concentration is.
Good point, Doug. Yeah, because you can buy knockoff brands and they are all different concentrations. So reading the label is always a good exercise when you use herbicides. In fact, it's required by the law. Not that nobody leaves every law unturned. Again, thank you very much.